So this PowerPoint presentation video is going to go over paper 2, which is the IB English exam that you will take on May 8th. And this is going to be the essay that you write based on the works that we studied this semester, which is part 3, the genre study. And our genre was, of course, drama, which is why we read our 4 plays. So I'm just going to go through the basics of the exam with you, talk to you a little bit about the instructions, and also discuss with you some possibilities for how you might respond to some of these prompts. So this is going to be the instructions that you guys encounter on the first page. And this just basically tells you that don't open the exam until you're told to do so. And then the second set, or the second bullet point, talks about you have to base your answer on at least two plays from the part 3 works. And it says you could include a part 2 work if the same genre is relevant. And then it also mentions that answers that are not based on part 3 works will not receive high marks. And then you are not permitted to bring copies of any of the books or pieces that we've read into the examination room. So on the next page in the test booklet that you'll receive, and I did the separate video on the test booklet itself, so these are just copied from there. So it's really important, just to remind you, you answer, this is why they repeat the directions, you answer one essay question only, and you have to base your answer on at least 2 of the part 3 works, right? So the plays that we've read. And it says you could include a part 2 work if it's the same genre. If not, then you can't. And then again, it repeats that same idea. Answers which are not based on a discussion of at least part 3 works are not going to receive high scores. So this is an overview of what we did this semester. So part 3 works were our genre study, which were the dramas. So part 3, second semester, senior year, and we read The Crucible, Broken Calabash, Blood Relations, and Othello. So you would have to pick minimum of 2 from this list. Now, the directions say you could do a work from part 2 if the genre is relevant, but part 2, we didn't study any dramas. We did the poetry, we did the short stories by Eldritch, and we did the novel by Margaret Atwood. So that's why we can't use any of these, so please don't get yourself confused. Only write about the plays. Okay, so here are a couple of sample prompts regarding drama. And these 2 sample prompts are from the booklet, from the other video with the sample test booklet, and also these are 2 prompts that are also on your final exam for my class. So the first question, it talks about masks, and it says masks can be used literally and metaphorically. In drama, discuss to what extent and for what purposes masks have been used in at least 2 plays you've studied. And what's important to understand about this prompt is it's not very accessible in terms of the plays that we've read. We haven't really seen masks specifically in any of the pieces. Possibly we could go with the metaphorically if we're saying like masking who you are as a human, or masking your feelings, or masking your emotions, things like that, but that would be a real stretch. So the second question is a lot more accessible, and it says referring to at least 2 plays you've studied, consider the presentation of jealousy and envy and ways in which such presentation is used to further the action in the plays. And this is a huge theme that we've seen throughout, honestly, a lot of the plays that we have read. So the second prompt is a lot more accessible, and actually you could almost do every single one of the plays we've read with that particular prompt. So the other prompts that you could select from would be the general questions about literature, but you'd still have to use, plays to answer these. So we have 4 available for us here. So in what ways and to what effect is war presented in the works of at least 2 writers you've studied? The only work we saw war in was Othello, so that one really wouldn't work for us. We wouldn't be able to do more than 1 play. The next one is, in what ways can our reactions to works of literature be influenced by our knowledge of their historical background, discussed with reference to at least 2 works you have studied? This one would work with The Crucible, because we have a lot of historical background knowledge on The Crucible, as well as Lizzie Borden, I would say, because Lizzie Borden, we have a lot of background knowledge on her as a person, her story, the murder case, and all of that. So I think number 10 would work with the Crucible and the Board and Play, Blood Relations. Number 11, some authors are read as much for their writing style as for what they're telling us. Comment on the language used by at least 2 writers you've studied. This is another one that I think you could use with the Crucible. Possibly the Crucible and Broken Calabash, because you could talk a lot about how in those 2 particular plays we have the social commentary on communism with the Miller play, as well as a commentary on the struggles between modern versus tradition in Broken Calabash. I think this one would be a little difficult, but I could definitely see it working with those 2 plays. And then the last one is Forbidden Fruit Tastes Sweetest. How far and in what ways is the statement illustrated in at least 2 works you have studied? I don't think this one is too easy. The Forbidden Fruit, I guess I could see it as Abigail Williams and the John Proctor relationship, potentially. The other thing that I could maybe think about is possibly Iago's wanting that position of lieutenant, but that is a huge stretch as well. So that would be very difficult for me to kind of connect those 2. So of all the different prompts, we just went through 6 of them. Of all the different ones, I would say the second one and the second one and maybe number 10 or 11. So I'm going to go with the second prompt, referring to at least plays you have studied. Consider the presentation of jealousy and or envy and the ways in which such presentations is used to further the action in the play. So when you're going through that thought process of picking your prompt, I highly suggest you read through all of them and then you think about which of these prompts actually fit with the plays that we have read. More likely than not, you're going to have, a couple options, and then pick the one that makes the most sense. Okay, so for this prompt, I could actually write about Othello, I could write about Broken Calabash, I could write about Blood Relations, and I could write about the Crucible. Can I write about some more easily or better than others? Of course, definitely. But all 4 are actually very accessible with this particular prompt. So this is just an overview of paper 2 and the prompts and kind of your selection process. So when you go into paper 2, just start thinking about what really works and which plays you're going to talk about. And then I'm going to give you a couple more suggestions. So how are you going to use these 2 hours of time? Well, I do suggest that you kind of break it down and you do the following items. So number 1, I do think that you should take some time and read through all the prompts and very carefully select the prompt that you're going to do. Next, you're going to break down what the prompt is asking you to do. So what does this particular prompt, need from you as a writer and as you're analyzing? So what does it want you to explicitly state? And we're going to go back to the previous prompt that we selected and kind of break it down a little bit further. So you need to break it down. And then you need to think about the plays that you're going to use for your essay. So which ones are you going to use? 2 to 3. And then I suggest that you jot down connections you see between the prompt and the works that you've selected. And then you want to go ahead and start your outline. So what's your intro going to look like? What are your body paragraphs going to look like? Perhaps you'll have 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know how many body paragraphs you plan on having, but you can have multiple, especially if you're writing about multiple works. You might have, additional body paragraphs to really flesh out the idea. And then you're going to draft your essay. Depending on time, your draft may end up being your final draft. It's, unlikely that you'll have so much time that you can write an entire essay and then spend a ton of time editing and revising. But if that's how you function, great. If you do have the amount of time to do all of that, wonderful. But if it takes you more time initially to plan and get started, then that's okay too, because the planning time hopefully will result in you having a better product from the beginning. So I'm going to look at prompt number 2, and I'm going to break it down just a little bit further with you guys. I'm going to do a separate video where I do some actual planning in the video to kind of show you a little bit further. But let's say I'm picking prompt number 2, and I need to first decide which plays I'm going to write about. So I'm definitely going to write about the Crucible and Othello. Those two are for sure's for me, and then maybe I'll include Blood Relations based on how much writing I get done with the first two plays. So if I feel like I have enough content with Othello and the Crucible, I might skip out on Blood Relations. But if I'm feeling like it's not enough to really get my idea across, then I might add the others. So the question is asking about the presentation of jealousy or envy, and then the ways in which the presentation is used to further action in the plays. So I kind of broke it down into a couple things. So first, how is jealousy presented? So I'm thinking, who's jealous and why? Because I want to definitely introduce that aspect. And then I need to think about the second part of the question, which asks, how does jealousy further the action of the play? Which further breaks down into the idea of how does jealousy affect the characters' behaviors in the play? So, for example, if I'm thinking about Iago, he's jealous, right? So we have Iago's jealousy. Why is he jealous? For multiple reasons. He's mad because of Cassio. He's jealous of Othello. Why? Because they have higher ranking than him, because he feels like he's been slighted, because he feels as though, race also plays a role. Age, he's upset that Cassio is so much younger than him. So there's multiple reasons as to why. And then how does the jealousy affect their behavior? Well, in this case, his jealousy is the catalyst for Othello's downfall, right? And his jealousy ends up being something that he's able to then push onto Othello, who also then becomes jealous and angry and ends up taking action against Desdemona and Cassio as well. So you can kind of see in this particular play, it shows as like this disgusting thing that grows and it consumes you. So it consumes Othello, it consumes Iago, everything they do, all their actions, their behaviors kind of are just completely engrossed in that feeling of needing what someone else has. And the fear that comes with jealousy as well. And then in the Crucible, the jealousy really comes from Abigail. She is jealous of Elizabeth Proctor. She is feeling envious of the life that Elizabeth Proctor has, and then she acts out in a way that her need for, John Proctor and her need to have this life that she believes that she absolutely needs kind of is, again, a catalyst for the entire town becoming undone, essentially. So, and then if I were going to go on with Blood Relations, I might talk a little bit about how in Blood Relations, we can really see that Lizzie Borden is jealous of the people in the town. She's envious. She wants this lifestyle that she believes that she deserves and that she should have. And this leads to her feeling like she's entitled to things. So the jealousy that she has for her her stepmother. She's very jealous of her stepmother and her stepmother's family. And that leads to her feeling entitled. And so you can talk, about the consumption or the consuming feelings that come along with jealousy. You could talk about the feeling of being entitled, the different things in terms of how it affects people and how they end up feeling due to being jealous. And then obviously you would go on to further explain how that then pushes them to do the things that they do. So those would be kind of my 3 initial plays that I would have originally picked for this particular question. I'm actually, as I'm talking, thinking maybe Blood Relations might be a little bit easier than the Crucible, but I think they both work on some level. It's just you'd have a little bit more struggle in terms of writing, in terms of getting the idea out there with the Crucible. And Blood Relations, Othello is very obvious. That one works very easily with this particular prompt. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up this video here, and then I'm going to do some other videos on breaking down the prompt a little bit further. Hopefully this was helpful for you.